You would, yeah, definitely become a member. You would have saved 50% on tonight. That's a joke. So just again, just brief, so those of you that aren't, everybody knows, but I'm going to say it anyway. So 25 years I've been the cartoonist for the Fairbanks Daily News-Miner, some other papers and magazines around the state. What I'm going to show you tonight is kind of a cursory overview of encapsulating a lot of the opportunities and things that go on in this community that gave rise to all the work on this wall. Or I would say approximately 98% of everything that is in this exhibition was spawned, to use that term, salmon spawning, spawned, not the bad guy spawn, from one of the events that I'm going to touch upon in this show. We ran a little bit short on the last talk, but I want to encourage people to attend next Saturday's workshop because we're going to have an intro to graphic novels where Elizabeth had mentioned Greg Hill is going to talk, probably dovetail a little bit more towards parents and teachers that are confused about graphic novels and what may or may not be appropriate. And we're also going to have Jeff, who did that up there. Jose is going to come in and talk about his graphic novels, and we're also going to have a special guest of Brianna Reagan and Alex Bates, who create an online graphic novel. Also, it's in hard copy, and I think they were in town but failed to make it to the opening, so let's hope that they bring the volume 2 of The Clockwork Queen of Oz, and they will talk about their process, and I'm going to have a lot of samples of some contemporary and historical graphic novels, in case anybody gets bored and just wants to sit in the back row and read comics, which is not a bad thing. Next. So the very first Cartoon North show that happened about 9 years ago at the Annex, a now defunct gallery. It's a distillery now, still a good place. But that happened in 2007, and one whole wall was culled from the archives of the Rasmussen Library. And I spent months going through historical editorial cartoons from about the time of statehood for Alaska. And it is an incredible resource. All libraries are. I mentioned Greg Hill of the library. Our public library in downtown Fairbanks boasts more comics and graphic novels than any other library in the United States. That is an astonishing fact, and it's largely on account of his efforts. So the Rasmussen Library has a really nice archive. Some of it is accessible online. At the end of this talk, you all are gonna be taking notes. I'm going to have some other online resources for you to access some cartoon and comic art information. But for this Cartoon North show, I had that on one wall, and then on one wall I had a sampling of cartoon and comic art from across the state of Alaska. I had somebody from Yakutat all the way to Barrow. There is a cartoonist up there. There's a whole bunch that show up in Juneau. There's a lot that are in Anchorage. So there's a whole mess of them in the whole state. And one of the interesting things about this show is I waited until the very last minute to not invite any of the really big names. Chad Carpenter, who draws Tundra, would be an obvious one at the top of the list, because I wanted to see if we had enough here, and we do. Obviously, we filled up the gallery. That was great. Okay, and some of the other works that were in the show were the beginnings of what you see here of student work and people that I encounter in a lot of the cartoon and comic art events, which you'll see when we go next, when we carry on. One of the things that I really enjoy doing now, I am an officially licensed artist in residence through the program that the Fairbanks Art Association facilitates, the Artists in Schools program. You have to go through a little bit of a training period to get on board with the curriculum, to make sure everything fits. And I am on the roster of artists in the interior, soon to be statewide, where any art teacher can get together with the principal and invite an artist in to work for a week or 2 week long residency with a public school. And that is a fabulous program. I think one of the most sublime things and one of the meta points behind this whole show happening is so many people came into the opening and were like, what are these things? Why are comics in the wall of a gallery? Number one. And I think the ascendancy of graphic novels, it's kind of like a a double front now. We have not only comics becoming accepted as a legitimate art form, okay, so they're in galleries and being taught in art departments, but the other side coming in from the other flank would be on the literary side for literacy. So we have two different fronts coming in, and as a little bit of a confession, I am a high school dropout, and I failed a lot of my art classes. Why? Because I wanted to draw comics. And I had an art teacher who was like, oh, that's really nice, that's really cute, but it doesn't count. Seems kind of harsh now. Now we have a lot of public education people, teachers in the classroom realizing that this might be the last best chance we have to instill a love of learning, a love of reading, and maybe a little bit of love of drawing. Next image, please. I gotta remember to keep going through this or I'll run out. So here's an example of what I do when I work in classrooms. Part of the Artist in Residency program stipulates that you must spend half of your time doing your artwork, which is awesome. It is a great opportunity. I choose to do mine in a library. So for half of my days during my residency, I would set up camp in the library and I would draw originals every single day. So faculty, staff, students, people that were not in art classes, they could take advantage of the time to just come by, show me their work, have me critique their portfolios, to work one-on-one with them, and for them just to sit and watch me draw, which is a really cool thing, and maybe come up with ideas together. So this is some work in progress about the last lecture I gave here. I talked a little bit through my sketchbook. I go through a little thumbnail sketch, a little doodle. I pencil it, then I ink it. This is the preliminary stage of putting wash on it, and so there's an example of the wash. So this is one of my tables during my residency. Next. This is Alaska Art Education Association. I give constant lectures and presentations to teachers that are interested. So reading this over, from editorial cartoons to single panel gags, syndicated strips to webcomics, alternative to mainstream comic books, storyboards and character design to graphic novels, the medium of sequential art is not only popular, but is gaining critical recognition, going back to that, what I was talking about, the dual front. Comics are now accepted as a legitimate and uniquely engaging interdisciplinary educational tool for both literacy and the visual arts. Good case in point is when I had my residency at the last school at Eielson Junior High and High School, I was invited to work with the graphic arts class. So I spent some time with the graphic artists, the teacher that had graphic arts, because, hey, look at that, t-shirts. How can I make money as an artist? Well, by default, a lot of the tools and skills that you learn as a cartoonist are very easily applicable to commercial art, to graphic arts. And I also spent time in the history class talking about editorial cartoons. I got to spend a little bit of time with the English teacher talking about graphic novels. Most of the time spent with the art teacher, of course, and then the other half spent on my own doing my own work. So it applies in a lot of different situations. Next. There I am. Yay. So that was my little setup. I think for the next Saturday session workshop, I have two huge bags. I have my portion of my own little library, and we'll have a lot of other samples from Greg coming in. I would always bring in a rotating display of current, contemporary, and some historical graphic novels and comics and comic art. And we'll have a slide that has a little smorgasbord buffet that you can take note of. Next. This was the comic book. Probably the most important thing to happen after any one of the workshops or classes that I teach is for everyone to have work published in a collective comic book. So this is The Raven and the Lynx. Next. This is an example of me destroying the Eielson Raven and Eielson Lynx mascots. But we start off with something that's really, really easily applicable and understood by all the kids that are going to the school. So I take their mascots. And when we're working on character design, so here are the characters, and this is just a couple doodles of mine, my version of a raven and my version of a lynx. And then we use this as an excuse to explore some of the pen and ink techniques and how to render texture and show value and volume. So we have hatching and stippling and cross hatching and a little bit of scumbling in here too, I believe, right around here.
What?
Scumbling, scribbling. When you take a ballpoint pen, I think didn't I show it the last thing? You take a little ballpoint pen as a good technique, and you just do lots and lots and lots of little scribbles. It's a term kind of adopted from painting, like scumbling is a technique used in painting. And if you use pen and ink, I should have a good sample. If there's not one here, one coming up soon. and I'll just do a demo afterwards. Next. Another place that this very morning, actually, 8 o'clock, we started off again. This will be my 4th season with the Visual Art Academy. There's 2 cartoon and comic art classes that are at the junior high school level. You know, and one of the things that's just amazing to me, not just to validate kids that are like, to say, yes, this counts, this is legit. I think in an art classroom setting, it's awesome when you have an art teacher. I have to credit Dave Mollett and Todd Sherman for my longevity in the art department teaching the comics class. This will be the 10th year I've taught it at the summer at the college level, beginning and advanced. And it counts, it's legit, they accept it. Why? Because when they look at some of these works, they understand that this is a drawing. Duh, but it really is. It's got all of the visual art qualities that a drawing has. It has composition, it has line weight, it has texture, it has value, and so on and so forth. You know, forget it, we haven't even talked about color yet. So it counts as a valid art form, okay? That's one of the reasons I wanted to have this show in the gallery and why it's so awesome to see these works up on the wall. Next. Also at the, okay, so here they all are. You know what's amazing, one of the best things about teaching comics, especially like the summer session class, is it's the only class I've ever had. They show up an hour early and they will stay an hour late. I've even tried to end the class early a couple times. I'm like, you know what, let's knock off. It's 15 minutes early. You guys have worked really hard. Hello? Hello? And they won't. I have never seen in any other class that much, you know, I guess obsession is one word. Discipline, dedication to the craft. I mean, and that's just amazing. To be in an entire room full of 15 or 20 students and to hear every single one of them stippling with a Sharpie. It's my favorite noise in the whole world. When I went to graduate school, I have an MFA in sequential art, which is a $40,000 way to say comics, from the Savannah College of Art and Design. I took, even though I was 10 years older than most of the other students, 20 years older than some of the other ones, I took a Cartooning 101, a beginning cartoon class. Didn't count towards my degree. And I went in there and here's this old guy. Right? And everybody, when they found out, I was like, you have books. You have like 4 or 5 books out and you're in newspapers. Or why are you taking this class? I'm like, because I never have. This is awesome. You know, to be able to put your work up on the wall and have it critiqued, right, by other artists, like, you know, not that that's not funny. That's funny. Nah, that's not funny. But to critique it and talk about things like your lettering and your line weight and your legibility. I mean, that was mind-blowing. That was just great to have it taken seriously, have it as a legitimate art form. Next. So when I teach these classes, the class that I have developed is a 2-year program scrunched into 6 weeks. It's insane. Okay, are there any of my former students here? No, there are not. Yes, so they would tell you that I can talk about comics for 3 hours a night, 5 days a week, for 6 weeks, and always be bummed because I forgot to say this, I didn't mention that, I have to remember to say this the next time. My roster of activities, we first start off with character design. This is a sample from one of the in-class exercises. We have critiques. We move through a, dare I say, a sequential fashion through the whole class where we start with materials and techniques, and that is an excuse to start addressing the character design. This is one of the sheets. They have to do front profile, 3/4 view, back view. They have to do a drawing, a pen and ink drawing of their 2 characters, because sometimes they play off each other, have a sidekick. They have to do the 2 of them in context, in an environment with props in some certain setting. Also another one of their sheets, so this is an example. Their first critique involves 6 different sheets of Bristol board that they all have to put up. So that's in, you know, just a week, less than a week. They have like 4 days to do this one particular assignment. So it's kind of a little bit of a shock because it's a lot of work. So some students are like, I thought this was going to be fun. This is cartooning. It's like, yeah. And the fun part happens when you start doing lots and lots of work. You know, it'll get fun, more funner. So this is an example of using their characters, the 6 basic human expressions. There's a theory that there's 6 expressions that are universal. Happiness, anger, sadness, fear, disgust, joy. Okay, so this is an example of, you know, another thing about comics is the diversity of style. and the range of expression, the quality of these lines, these marks, these characters, okay? It doesn't really matter that somebody is an exquisite artist and can render, you know, extremely realistically, because this is just as effective as this in expressing emotion. It's all about visually communicating the art. All right, and same thing when you look at the walls up here. There's such a range of different applications of cartoon and comic art, and there's just as many different styles as there are things to draw about. Next. I got to keep moving. So here's some examples of the characters themselves. I like to have two because they'll play off against each other. One of the joys in this class is I probably shouldn't say this, but I fall in love with the characters sometimes more than the students that draw it. I'm like, wait, what happens next? You got to keep drawing this, because they develop a life of their own. You know, I know their names, I know their story. Well, they have to tell it too, and it's just an amazing experience to see them render and create these characters. Next, there's another example. Generally, primarily, we work in black and white, and that's old school because that's the way to, you know, it's cheapest to photocopy stuff. Now with the digital age, it's a lot easier. You don't have to pay for full color printing. And for my advanced students, they have to do more of the same amount of the same type of work, but they also have to include the addition of color. Color can be a very descriptive, powerful narrative tool, can add dimensions to character, can accentuate certain parts of the story. Next. Some of the exercises that we do to come up with work like this. Where do you come up with your ideas is like the #1 question I always get as a cartoonist or as a comic artist. These are called cartoon jams, which we are going to do here. We've got 2, it's probably going to go into 3 hours, just saying. We've got so many different cartoon jam styles to work through. And this is when a bunch of my friends, we get together in different places. This happens, just Google the term cartoon jam. So here is a sample of one kind of free association, snowballing, passing off one to another. A lot of professional cartoonists employ gag writers, so they'll come up with a drawing and they'll pass it around the room, and they'll be like the guy that draws BC and Johnny Hart that draws BC and Wizard of Id. Once a week he'll get together with his writers and they'll pass ideas around. They'll just snowball, bounce things off of each other. It's no different than the stand-up comedian. Okay, so when you have Jay Leno come out on stage, he doesn't ad-lib much of anything. He's got a team of professional writers making sure everything is really funny. Same thing with the comics and comic strips. There's a team of people that make sure that this cash cow every single time is going to be, you know, really funny. Like Garfield is a good example. Some people are different, like Schultz. Did it all himself. That's awesome. So here's a drawing of Pooh on Santa's lap. And we pass it around. One person does a little pencil sketch, and we just pass it around. And 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. I like timed exercises because too many artists get hung up on this. Oh, I gotta wait for the muse. Oh, I gotta wait for this idea. How do I get an idea? I've got writer's block. Get over it. Write something down. This is stupid. Yes, good. Make it stupider. And then pass it, you know, keep passing it along, and everybody just kind of reacts to that. So here we have a whole, you know, looks like Santa made a new friend, no girls, and our 3-year, and what? I don't get that. How about, I want reindeer sausage. Winnie, don't poo in my lap. Winnie about your diabetes. No honey. And then this was in the winter. It says, kill Christopher Robin. Ooh, that's you never know what's going to happen. Here is a moose, and a bunch of aliens have crashed. This is called a blind or a deaf gag, which means it's just an image, and we got to come up with captions to it. So we have a UFO that has crashed, and we have a bunch of aliens. And I think the winning on this is, I need a vacation or something, my crap is talking to me. So it looked like a bunch of moose nuggets. Yeah, and there's just, he's so beautiful. Take us to your leader. They just keep coming up with the ideas and pushing them. This is another cartoon jam. This is called The Exquisite Corpse. Some of you probably heard of that, where it's either folded over so you can't see, but sometimes you just start. You start with, you can see where this person started. The next person has the next section, and they have to, what you do is you fold it over so you can't see everything. You just see a little bit. And the next person will pick up on that. Okay? And they pick up on that, and then they pick up on that, and then you unfold it. And here you have this story that may or may not make any sense at all. So that's called an exquisite corpse. Next. More timed exercises. This is called Think Before You Ink. It's one of my favorite exercises to do. It's where we have teams of people. I would take like 3 or 4 people, put them in groups. One person leaves and goes out in the hallway and waits while the other people left are handed a scenario. This one is basically, it's a moose popping out of a cake for a bachelor party for a bunch of hunters. This one is a mad scientist with a Frankenbunny, and this one, the caption is basically a dragon falling in love with the knight instead of the damsel in distress. So I give this to these people, and your challenge is, how in 60 seconds with a Sharpie are you going to draw that scenario? Wow, that seems like it's almost impossible. This is great. The best artists usually fail this miserably. The people who have the worst trouble rendering, they rock it every time. Because the best artists are like, okay, I got to draw a moose coming out of a cake. Now, what kind of ornamentation is going to be on the cake? I have to make sure my linear perspective is perfect, and at the moose, the anatomy of the moose, and blah, 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 time's up, sorry. And meanwhile, the person's like, rock it. Here's a moose coming out. And what happens is the people that are outside have to come in, and I hold it up in front of them, and they have to guess this scenario. So we talk about the effectiveness, visual communication, and how it does not matter that you really know how to draw. Going on my last lecture, the more drawing classes you take, it's not going to hurt you. The better off you'll be. But that said, look at that. That's a dragon. What else do you need to show in order for people to know that's a dragon, and that is a knight, and that is in love, and that is a damsel? What is it that makes a Frankenbunny? Big ears, bolts in the neck, a scar across the head. That's definitely a mad scientist. I mean, that's great. That's all you need. So for cartoons and comics, there's a whole diversity. You can really know your anatomy. You can know your linear perspective. You can know your color. Do you have to? Not necessarily. It's just getting that point across as fast as you possibly can. Next. These are samples. After we develop the characters and we become comfortable using the tools, we'll move on to single panel gag cartoons and to comic strips. And these are excerpts. This is from a poster I designed, just showing off the range of different styles, all within one class. All of the people. I mean, just absolutely beautiful. I love the expressive potential. Look, you can see somebody kind of familiar. It's right back here somewhere, I think. That character is on the wall right here, which is great. She is in this show. And who else is in this show? I think that's everybody from right now. And he is in the show. There's Olin Syme, Bethany Eisenman, and this would be Melanie Post, and she's in the show right now. Next. This is another example of a cartoon jam and how to come up with ideas. There's several ways to go about this. One is we have a strip of paper, and it's folded in thirds, and I have one person start a story. And then I pass it off to another person, and they do the third panel. And then a third different person has to figure out some way to link these two together. Okay, it doesn't get any more simpler than this. Mommy, I love this, and we have unexpected things. This is 3 different people drew this. Sometimes it's one person starts, the second person does the second panel, the third person completes everything. Okay, so we have unexpected graphic violence. Any kids in here? Sorry. Okay, don't look at that. Mommy, don't you love me? No. Thank God, no subjugation of expectations and disappointments. I'm relieved that you will not live vicariously through me. And we don't have to spend quality time with each other. I was worried. Oh, good. I mean, where does that come from? That's fantastic. Next. That's the cartoon jams. We do a lot of other exercises. I have one called Late for School, which I give out, and they have to, with no words, okay, even though sequential art is ostensibly the juxtaposition of image and text, of pictures put together with words, sometimes you don't need words to tell the story. You should be able to effectively have the narration come across just using the pictures. And I have a scenario right now where a person wakes up, realizes they're late, runs out the door, gets to school, and by the time they get there, they realize it's Sunday. So how can they impart this with just the merest amount of time, because they only have a couple minutes for each panel, 6 to 8 panels to tell this story. We put them all up on the wall. I go through more Sharpies and index cards than anybody you've ever known. Next. This is an example of another application for sequential art. You can do it with single panel gag cartoons, with editorial strips, with cartoon strips like the syndicated ones you see in the newspaper. There's also graphic novels, there's short stories, there's collaboration, which we'll go through in a minute here. One of the more lucrative jobs to get as a sequential artist would be doing storyboards, because most people are not going to spend a lot of money to come up with a scene and to film it. Pretty much every DVD out there has special features that you can tap into, and you can see the storyboard artists behind the scene. Like Open Range is one of my favorites. It's a Western. Well, they've got hundreds of heads of cattle, and they got people running around, cowboys on horses, and there's a gunfight in a town. Well, they're not going to have everybody show up and not know where they're going to go, so they'll use a storyboard artist, is usually in the pyramid, the next person underneath the director. Everybody's going to look at that comic artist. The people who design the sets, the people who design the costumes, the dialogue, everybody, the camera people, they're all going to go off of one comic book artist's designs, sketches, in conjunction with the director. Okay? This is from an exercise I developed called Shootout at the Great Pumpkin Patch. And what I make them do is we watch 2 movies. We watch Wyatt Earp and we watch Tombstone, which both came out within a year of each other. And there is a 3.5-minute sequence of when they are walking down the street to the shootout at the OK Corral, and I end it right before any gunfire. What I'm interested in is the setup, the pacing, the drama, the build. How did 2 different directors approach the same action? How did they, where were the camera angles? How did they, what's the music like? And then what we do is we watch It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. And what I task them with, they have character sketches, developments. It's also a very, very simple characters to draw and a very, very simple environment. But what they have to do is thumbnail script out the scene where Lucy gets Charlie Brown to kick the football, but they have to design it as if it was a Western. Okay, so you have to look at it, and it's because, like, here's the cool thing about Charlie Brown. Never changes camera angle. It's always like this. It never, ever changes. It's always this. So what would happen if you zoomed in on Charlie Brown's face? If you pulled way back and you saw the 2 figures, if you could see Charlie Brown going before he would run at it. I mean, if you did a little shot like off to the side down lower between Charlie Brown's legs, and there's Lucy off in the distance. I mean, this is awesome how you can take the exact same subject matter, just redraw it a little bit. And that's the beautiful thing about comics and cartooning, is you're not limited by any budget. I like using the term cat cam. Put a little camera on a cat's head, and that's the way you want to look at the world, like this, up above, down. Too many people are used to looking at art like it's a TV screen, or it's up on a stage. Same perspective, same view every time. This, you can go nuts, you can go wild. Look at that view, the texture on the football, okay? Same character, same situation, completely different story, just in the way you choose to tell it with your angles. Next. There's another story called Wrong Planet. This is what I like to do. On index cards, I break the class up into different sections. This section of the class is going to have to draw, each person will draw like maybe 2 or 3 sections of the story, and their section of the story is an astronaut blasts off from planet Earth, goes to a different planet, lands, plants the flag, gets back on the spaceship, comes back to the planet, gets off to a lot of fanfare, only to discover he's come back to the wrong planet. So how are we going to tell this story? So it's a group exercise. Everybody gets in on this. And we knit, everybody's section gets put up on the wall, all drawn by different people, but it's a different team did this section. Okay, and we look at it, and we rearrange the cards. Believe me, this would cover eventually this whole wall sometimes. It gets really, really out of control. Because I'll say, okay, now that you've got this section, I have this team Go to this section, I'm like, add some beats, add some more, stretch this out. It's like an accordion. What's going to work? And expand, contract. And we keep expanding, keep expanding. Pretty soon we've got this awesome graphic novel. You know, it's great. And then, at the end, I'm like, okay, how few panels can you reduce that same exact story down and still have it tell the same story? Rocket takes off. They get out of a space, a lunar lander. They go back. And here's somebody looking at a bunch of aliens. Is that the same story? And we talk about that. How can we, what's the bare minimum? What do you need? Taking off, landing and planting a flag, kind of getting a little mixed up in the trip home back to the galaxy, landing, question marks. This is the same story. So it's kind of interesting when you look at the elasticity of cartoon and comic art. Me, I do single panels. That's beyond so many artists. I never knew that until I went to grad school and started talking with other cartoon artists. They're like, I don't know how you do that. I'm like, what do you mean? This is the easiest thing, to do it in one panel. Like, I can't figure out how to make a page out of this. But then that's a graphic novel. Graphic novels, sometimes I love them because it's like the whole first page is just making a cup of coffee in the morning. The poetry behind that can be really, really beautiful, given the camera angles, the pacing of the story. Next. Let's see, sometimes I have special people come to the class. I'm really happy now. I've had people like Scott McLeod and David Peterson come through to my classes. But now I love having former students. There's Alex and Brianna, whose work is right over here, showing some of her work. I love talking, she's a great example of somebody who's a very successful local artist. She's always in the trenches. You can see her at the farmer's market. She just had a show of some paintings in another gallery. Yeah, she's a great artist, she's a great painter. Oh, I love her comics. I love her pen and ink. And nobody ever gets to really see them. These are her originals that she brought in. And she sells prints of them sometimes. But it's just, I mean, for me, that's, you know, almost as inspiring, if not more, than to bring in a big rock star, but to see somebody who's local who's making it. And that's part of the reason why we had this show. Next. Your startup disk is full. Pause for station item. Does this mean I'm running out of time? How am I doing? Halfway through?
You're good. We got a little late start. It's 7:40 now.
7:40, so I got about 20 minutes. I'm going to talk a little bit faster. I'm going to get a little bit more excited. This is Layla Lawler. She lives in a cabin out in Fox. She has been doing graphic novels. She is so amazing, so cool. You know how she does graphic novels? And I don't know if she's going to show up next week for the intro to graphic novels. She doesn't script. She does everything wrong, everything backwards. But man, she started out with mini comics. Now she's got big, huge fat books of her own graphic novels, and she just goes almost panel by panel. What's going to happen next? Ooh, what's going to happen next? Turn the page. What's going to happen now? It's not like meticulously scripted out and planned, you know. So there's a lot of different ways to approach this work. This is Lucas Elliott, who now resides in Anchorage. Some of his work is on display up here. He just recently did, look at that, a cover for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is, you may have heard, is a movie in the theaters right now. He just did that cover. Local fanboy. Yeah, he's done good. He just illustrated Chad Carpenter's Moose movie, his graphic novel, and I believe these are for sale in the gift shop, that particular book. So he is doing quite well for himself. Next. Speaking of Chad Carpenter, I actually had to drive to the fair and pick him up and haul him to my class, which was amazing. I would have to say, probably, right now, definitely, yes, the #1 biggest artist associated with the state of Alaska in its history. Pretty bold claim, but he is in 700-800 newspapers around the world now. Okay, he's got a guy working for him. His only job is to sell more Tundra. He supports his family, and Chad supports his, and they support him as well. Really nice guy, very approachable. Go to the fair, tell him Jamie said I could bug you. Jamie said I could get a free book. No, don't. But he came to the class, and what an amazing opportunity that, you know, these people, they're here, they're approachable. This is Anna Bongiovanni, the one person, I got to let this go, because it's the one out of 43 artists that I had didn't make it into the show. I got her stuff in my car. Oh man, is she amazing. She's in Minneapolis now. She went to Minneapolis College of Art and Design, who now also has a cartoon and comic art, sequential art degree. She is really into mini comics, and she's making a big name for herself. I think everydayfeminism.com. She does a lot of queer art, web comics, and her own mini comics and graphic novels. She is absolutely amazing, and I'll bring in some samples of her work next week. Next, one of the exercises that I love to do, and how a lot of this came about in this show, is a collaborative approach, which is unique to comics, okay? Painters get a little upset if you were to walk up and say, hey, this is great, I love the Denali painting, but maybe we should add a beaver right here or something. They get a little touchy about that. Comics is the only genre where collaboration is actually an asset, okay? When you look at traditional comic books, like Marvel and DC are the best examples, the main functional distinction between those comics and a graphic novel would be the graphic novel is largely, most of the time, the work of one person. They do everything. Comic books, it's a team effort. Somebody is a writer. They do a script. And then somebody else pencils it, somebody else inks it, somebody else colors it, somebody else does the letters, and there's editors, editors, editors. Every step of the way, there's always editors. So one of the exercises that I do in all of my classes is kind of mimicking that process. They're tasked with coming in with a one-page script for a one-page comic. Pretty simple. Panel 1, and this is what's great about comics that's different than other art forms, is when you trying to force visual artists to write down stuff before they draw it is amazing. Their brain just sometimes goes in all kinds of interesting directions. We have so page 1, panel 1. Guy gets into his car and drives away in the city, or gets into his car. Well, what kind of car? What's the camera angle? What's the building? What's the background? What's the time of the year? What's the time of the season? What does it look like? What kind of clothes is he wearing? If you don't write all that down, the person who draws it, the pencils it, never is going to make something up, and it'll turn into a beaver or something. You know, you got to be careful about that. So here's an establishing shot. Winter scene outdoors. A dog. A person skiing with a dog. So here we have somebody mushing with a dog. Panel 2, it falls off a cliff. Sled falls off a cliff. Sled falls through the ice. Sled crashes into a tree. Panel 5, runs into a moose. And then the dog says something. I had to do this to fill in a blank because somebody didn't show up. And I'm like, I got to write a script. So here we have a pencil. One person penciling it. Dog running away over the cliff, into a hole in the ice, into the tree, into the moose. And by the time we get all the way down here, it has changed because 4 or 5 different people have now worked on it. It's more of a synthesis of styles. Sometimes I have some of the weaker renderers ink over the pencil lines. Sometimes I have some of the stronger artists correct some of the pencils of some of the other students. But for the most part, it's random. So here we have mush, go, mush, blub, 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 mush, crack, moose, you know, and now the dog is saying, next time you pull and I steer. So the end result is much different, kind of like this show, okay? If I was to just have one of these pieces up, I don't think it would have as much impact as all of these works collectively put together. It's one of the reasons I love books that are samplers instead of one artist's work, and there's tons of those. Next, another collaborative piece. Next, here's an example of what happens when we involve color. These are collaborative pieces. So one, two, three, 4 different people were involved. And this is great because there are some artists like, I can draw crazy, but I don't know what to draw. And there's so many other people out there like, I only wish I had an artist to draw, like they can write. And so collaboration is a really cool thing to do. Next, unique to comics, more collaborations. And I think it's really empowering too for people that maybe have some weaknesses, relative strengths and relative weaknesses, to work with somebody else. And it's a learning process too. Next, more collaborations. Next, these are more collaborations. Next, not much time to go through them. Oh, so the end result. This is in the comics class at the university level, advanced and beginning level. for 9 years now. We're going to have this Denali-sized comics, and these are some samples of different students' work. You know, and what I have to say is, even though this doesn't look as, you know, as awesome and mind-blowing as, say, a Lucas Elliott, keep in mind, 6 weeks before this student drew it, the difference is night and day. Some of the common mistakes that cartoonists make: cramped compositions, having lettering that goes like this and everything is all squished in, okay, not having clear panel borders, okay, some of the conventions of sequential art that help you read things, legible lettering. You know, these are all things that come together that it takes a lot of work, and then if they can get to this stage, then oh man, I'm happy, because in another few years they'll be on the walls in the gallery. Next. These are some more samples of final pages from artists. Their finals are a minimum 3-page piece that they did everything, and it gets published in that Denali Comics book. I will go through and I will pick a handful of single panels, a handful of editorial cartoons, a handful of strips. The collaborative pieces are a separate publication, but then I will publish all of their final pages in one comic book. Next. Ava Williamson, Yawp, Barbaric Yawp, Walt. Yes, his work, her work is up on the wall here. Next. Shawenta Hale, this is some of her single panels. I make them do single panels, and it's that accordion. We go from characters to single panels to strips to one pages to collaborative to several pages. Okay, so hopefully it's kind of like skipping a rock across the surface of the whole medium, and at some point they'll sink, they'll find a spot like, I like this works. I wish my Billy was as quiet as your Tommy. Yee-haw! I mean, that's powerful. That's amazing that she could say that in one panel. Does that diminish the quality of her 19 or 18 page long piece that's on the wall here? No. I think she just sold that too. Next. Woohoo! Or very, very simple. I love this. VHS tapes. Here it is. And if I'm looking at this right, it's already rewound and ready to go. Poignant. I think I'm looking at this right. It's been a while. Experiment number 42, butter. Always lands butter side down. Always lands on its feet, a cat. So what happens when you tape a slice of bread with butter to a cat and then drop it? Which way? Love these strips. Next. Next, we're going to keep going through these because I'm a little bit pressed for time. Go ahead, next panel. So we have different don't rip. You know that little tag that's on the mattress? Ha ha ha. That's harsh. I love this. Waiter, check please. I mean, that's the cool thing about sequential art, is this slow reveal, timing, pacing. Okay, you introduce the element of time, the passage of time, once you have this little gutter in between the panels. When we read this, we automatically, it's called closure, according to Scott McCloud, comics theoretician. We see this, we know that it's the omnipresent third party, a narrator, waiter. We know that it's not this person because we'd have a thought bubble or a little cartoon speech bubble pointing to it. It's a little caption box, waiter, and we've got something going on here, but we know that this is a continuation of this. We hear, waiter. Even the words themselves now are turning into a visual art thing where the lettering is bolder and bigger. Waiter, check please. And then we pull back for the full reveal, and there's a hot date. Next. I tried killing a spider with hairspray. His hair is now more fabulous than mine. Oh, isn't that sad? All my friends are on Facebook. What's this? Trying to read Milton, huh? I'll be seeing you in detention. This is cartoon school. I have a lot of smart-ass students that make fun of me. That's cool. That's fine. Next. Also, for my advanced art students, they are tasked with coming up with a mini comic, a comic of their own, and in full color. So on the last day of class, we have a comics release party where everybody gets a copy of the main comic book for the whole class, and then the advanced students that I have been working with all along, going from character design thumbnail scripts, thumbnail compositions, pencils, inks, color, all the way to their final product. Next. And I always have the book release party in the comic shop, which I want to plug is one of the most awesome resources in this community because it avoids all the trite cliches of a comic book shop. It's well lit, it's clean, it's fun, it's got a lot of positive energy. There's young people there, and I always have my comics release party there because it is not too much of a jump, of a leap to say, here you are, looking at your work published in this book. It's going to be here next, on the shelves here. Next. How are we doing on time?
We should leave room for question and answer.
Oh, okay. Okay, so just a couple more. Yep. Paul Gravette has an awesome public Facebook page. Probably almost as good, if not better, than Scott McCloud, Comics Art. If there was one book I would have you read to understand more about cartoon and comic art, it would be this person's book that just came out last year. Paul Gravette, Comics Art. Next. This movie just came out called Stripped. Best documentary after this one, which is called Independence. Next. Oh God. Next. There are so many books out there that help you with drawing. This, I want to point out this one, two of them. Scott McCloud, Understanding Comics. He wrote the Bible of Comics called Making Comics. I actually prefer this Understanding Comics. It's a little bit more updated with web comics and a lot more samples of different cartoonists' work. Also, Jessica Abel and Matt Madden. Jessica Abel in particular has now written a series, Drawing Words and Writing Pictures, which incorporates an awful lot of exercises that I use because she got it from a lot of variety of different sources. But this is a wonderful book. It's rather a little bit pricey on the pricey side, but it's got good self-study. Anything by Will Eisner, who created the Shadow, graphic storytelling. This guy is the grand poobah, came up with the term sequential art. Next. And buy comics, read comics, all of them, everywhere. Next. There are so many out there. Next. So many different. There's my ad for the Literacy Council for Alaska. I'm actually almost done with my talk. We're wrapping things up here. Tutoring enriches two minds. Next. Yeah, that's all. I'm going to end it right here just in case any of you have any questions in particular about anything I've talked about so far or anything that's on the walls that you might want a specific follow-up. Elizabeth.
Did you already list all the places that you teach here in town?
I did not. Next. 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 I mean, there's one. Next. There's their comic book. Next. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. No, wait, go back. That's me. That was funny. Draw something new. You must obey me. I love, she got an A. How to be an annoying cartoonist by Nicole. Be an old man. I'm old. Grow a beard. Make sure it has squirrels. I'm a weirdo. Squirrel. Draw. Annoy little kids. Draw more. That's an A. Next. Next. I'm trying to get to one thing. Keep going. Scroll through. Be cartoon kablooey. This was at the Literacy Council. There's Lucas Elliott going rawr. This is drawing in front of kids. 24-hour Comics Day. This is another thing that goes on every single year. Next. This is where everybody gets together and the goal is to draw 24 pages of comics in 24 straight hours. Everybody does their own 24-page comic in 24 consecutive hours. Next. Next. 24-hour Comics Day. It happens at the comic shop. This is some shots of it. We'll have, I don't know, what did we have this year? We had probably 25, 35 people start out. Oops, back one more. Here's the comic shop. So this is all the people. We all get together. Things get a little weird around 18 hours. Comic cartoon jams. We do this all the time where we just meet next and draw. Just draw random cartoons. I think that is everything on that. So Visual Art Academy, random cartoon jams. And here on the schedule, right up there on the podium, you can find a schedule of events. We have an open cartoon jam where I'm going to have probably half the people that are in this show just hanging out, trying some of those different cartoon jams, right? So come hang out for that. And then a mini comic workshop too, which is always awesome. Oh, and then there's Fairbanks Urban Sketching, which is another group that has just started out that has nothing to do with cartoons, but I somehow always manage to ruin my drawings. But how did that get in there? So those are some of the opportunities that happen in this town. And if you want, please take one of my cards. My blog that I've had for 6-7 years called Ink and Snow started off as an experiment in documenting what it was like to be a beginning drawing teacher, and it has become thoroughly corrupted, and it's now all about comics. So it's just cartoons now. And you can search, you can go on the index side, you can look. I have so many resources, local friends, people that are in this show. You can just do a Google. There's terms. You can search by cartoon class, cartooning, cartoons. I have process posts about my own work and links to a lot of things. That's a really good opportunity. And I have some cards on the table that have that. Any other questions? Nope.
This might be kind of a basic one, but you curated this show, and you sort of gathered the artists that you knew. And how is it possible to just go around real quick to tell me what you think is most striking about each person or some of the people, or how did you rope them into this?
Some of them I would have to say most of them I did not rope into, because they would jump at the chance for legitimacy, a little bit of exposure. The camaraderie is one thing. Like nowadays, you know, people, I know some people came to the opening and were like, ooh, comics. And they think, you know, last night we saw Captain America and probably going to see X-Men this weekend. And, you know, it's all about, that's what people think cartoons and comics are. It's not. There's no superheroes in here, except for Admiral Pizza, but he's different. So make pizza, not war. Awesome. Okay, so, you know, they come in here with their stereotypes, their expectations. And that's one of the things I really wanted to dispel with this show, is like people's stereotypes. People walked in and were like, huh. First they were like, damn, I didn't know this gallery was this big. Because we took out all the dividers. But second, they were like, what are these things? Wait. And they took so long in here because I had to read all of the words. There's storyboards. This is, you know, what is this? 1 minute of animation right here. Single panel gags, graphic novels. Everything is all in here, all different genres. And for me, I can't say which one is the best, which one I like, because, yeah, there's twice as many of these people. That was kind of weird being a curator. I'm used to jurying, I'm used to grading, but it was just like, oh, you know, there's two sisters, and I picked one. You know, I wish I could have picked the other one, and I told the other one, was like, you're next, you're next, you're next. The next show, you'll do it, you know. There was boyfriend-girlfriend teams, and I picked her, not him, and it was like, you know, but look at this show, the diversity. Comics have changed so much, not just the maturity and sophistication of the storytelling, but there is something for everybody, for every gender, for every orientation, I mean, it's absolutely amazing. I think in my cartoon and comic art class, I've watched the ratio of boys versus girls. The majority is always women in my classes. That's what's amazing. Okay, but every year we'll have like high school advanced placement student to a retired guy and everybody in between. It's awesome. I don't see that in so many classes, and I don't see that kind of devotion, that passion for it. It's really, really cool. I didn't answer your question at all. What was it?
Actually, you made a fantastic point. I mean, some of this art is so personal. It's quite striking. It's like a poem or a story. It's an exposure of their art. And
that's why there's so much of it out there, and you can find it. When you go to a place, I want to use the comic shop as an example. It's a 4-part harmony, and why they've been around and so successful as long as they have. You walk in, manga. Jamie's boiled down history of cartoon and comic art was comics started in England. The editorial cartoons got passed off to America. We have the comic books. It kind of plateaus with the comic books. It gets handed off to Europe. It gets elevated into a fine art form. And then it gets handed off to Japan and China. Bam, we have manga. Now it gets recycled, and now we're going through this thing for the past 5-10 years where we have this amalgamation of styles happening, and it's awesome. It's all coming back. It's all getting mixed up. It's all comics. And we have the rise of web comics as well. Completely different medium and whole new territories opening up for it. And for me to try to represent that in this gallery, I think it worked. It worked. It worked very well. But there's so much more out there. And for people to go into a place like a bookstore or a library or the comic shop and say, like, here's manga over here, here's Marvel, DC traditional superheroes, here's the games, and then here's alternative independent comics, which is where I tend to have most of my, I like that. And yeah, you got to find an individual story, because something happens when you try to cater to the lowest common denominator. You wind up with, well, Captain America, that's another story. But you have these stories that are designed to appeal to as many people as possible, which is cool. But some of these, I want a connection. It's personal. It's really personal. You made a connection with one of my pieces about losing a dog. Not everybody wants to read about that, right? They read a comic, I want to be amused. This isn't funny. But some people that touches me, that reaches me. Any other questions?
The one that you were talking about, you had it up there, the waiter cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that you could tell that it was a separate narrator because it didn't have a thought bubble.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been noticing more often the use of specific captions instead of thought bubbles in recent comics?
I think sometimes too that can be an internal narration. So you have the person. I mean, I don't want to get too much into the nuts and bolts of it, but that's what it's about, image and text. Something magic happens. If you were to tape electrodes to people's brains and monitor the electrical activity happening when they're reading a comic, it is so much different than if you're looking at a picture or if you're reading a book. When you have the both, bam, all these different areas of your brain are lighting up simultaneously. It's pretty wild. And when you get into this, it gets really, really trippy when you get into all the different ways that you can narrate a story. And somehow, we've all been trained. If I was to show you a cartoon balloon, we know what that means. Who told us that? That means that person is saying that, right? Or I have a little weird, a little design, a little drawing. I wish I had something to draw with. You would know what that is, like this. This doesn't make any sense. Birds don't talk, but this bird is telling this person about somebody young. How expressive these things are. We know what these marks mean. Woohoo! Right? we know how to read this. What? It's its own iconography, its own secret language that is developed by just making these little marks on a piece of paper that stand for something. One more question. Anybody else? Somebody had one.
Final comment, the gallery's never seen bigger.
That's what happens when you have lots of little works. I want to thank you all for coming. Please consider signing up, volunteering for the Arts Association, becoming a member. It's pretty awesome. I got cards on the table, and I think there's carrots left too. So, thank you. Next image. No, just kidding.